I had just turned 17 a few weeks before this happened. My name's Tyler, and at the time I was recovering from a minor knee surgery I'd gotten from a skateboarding accident. It wasn't anything major, just a scope to fix a torn meniscus. But I was on crutches, moving slow and spending most of the weekend laid out on the living room couch with my leg propped up and wrapped. My mom had to leave town last minute to help my aunt, who was dealing with some emergency in Florida. And my dad works oil rigs in North Dakota, so it wasn't unusual for me to be home alone for a couple days. I told my mom I'd be fine. I'm stubborn like that. We live in a quiet area on the edge of town, in one of those single-level houses with a wide front yard and forest lining the back fence. It had always felt safe, familiar. But looking back now, I wish I'd spoken up and told her I wasn't totally comfortable being alone like that, especially not while I was still healing. The first night was uneventful, mostly just annoying. My leg was sore and I couldn't get comfortable, and the painkillers made me feel foggy. I spent most of the evening watching reruns of The Office with my dog Murphy, a lazy golden retriever who rarely barked unless the doorbell rang. Around midnight, I noticed the kitchen light flicker, not just a dim blink, but like a full stutter, on and off, twice. I figured it was just a power surge, which happens sometimes when it rains. But that night the sky had been clear. I got up, slowly, and limped over to the switch, flicked it off and on. It stayed steady. I didn't think too much of it at the time. Murphy was curled up by the couch, totally unbothered. I chalked it up to old wiring and went to bed. The second night was when things shifted. It started with Murphy. He kept pacing around the hallway between the living room and the back door, sniffing the floor like something had been there recently. He growled at one point, not loudly, but low and constant, like something had his attention. I called him over, but he wouldn't come right away, which was weird for him. When he finally trotted back, his ears were perked, and he sat down facing the hallway, just staring. I paused the TV and listened. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator. But that tension, that kind of silence that feels like it's hiding something, it made me feel watched. I ended up locking the back door, checking the windows, even though I was sure I had done that already earlier. Everything seemed in place. Still, I slept with the hallway light on. By Saturday evening, I was starting to feel edgy. I kept hearing little things, barely there thumps from the other end of the house, the kind of sounds that normally wouldn't register, but now made my stomach knot. I was in the kitchen heating up a frozen burrito when the breaker tripped. Whole house went dark. I nearly dropped the plate. Murphy barked for the first time that weekend, sharp and sudden, and ran toward the hallway. I hobbled after him, heart racing, using my phone flashlight. I made it to the breaker box in the laundry room and flipped it back on. Lights came back, but one thing stuck with me. The small bathroom window next to the laundry room was unlocked. I could have sworn I checked that one. And that was the moment I realized. Maybe I hadn't been as alone as I thought. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside. Not just the unlocked window, but little things started standing out. The front doormat was slightly crooked. A cereal box in the pantry was turned the wrong way, and the remote wasn't where I left it. They were small enough that I second-guessed myself, thinking maybe I'd just been tired or careless. But something in my gut said no. Someone had touched these things. I wanted to call my mom, but I didn't want to scare her. So instead, I texted my neighbor, Mr. Carlson. He's this retired guy who's always out watering his lawn or fixing something in his garage. He said he hadn't seen anything unusual, but he'd keep an eye out. That night, I pushed a chair in front of the back door and left Murphy in my room with me. I couldn't risk falling asleep on the couch again. Around 2 a.m., Murphy woke me up with a sharp bark. I sat up, heart pounding, and immediately heard what he did, faint creaking from the living room floorboards. Our house has these old wood planks that creak if you step in the wrong place. I wasn't moving. Murphy wasn't moving. But something out there was. I grabbed one of my crutches and just listened. The creaking stopped. Dead quiet. No footsteps back, no door opening. Just this heavy silence like the whole house was holding its breath. I stayed frozen for what felt like 10 minutes. I couldn't even bring myself to peek out the door. Eventually, I whispered Murphy's name and crept toward the living room, crutch under one arm, phone flashlight in the other. I scanned the room. Nothing. No movement. No sound. But then I noticed the sliding glass door that leads to the backyard. The curtain was open just a crack, something I never do at night. I hobbled closer and my stomach turned. There was a smudge, a palm print, right on the glass. It wasn't mine, and it was low enough that whoever made it had been crouching. I backed up slowly, trying to stay calm, and told myself to just grab the phone and call 911. That's when I realized the landline was dead. It was a cordless phone, and I thought maybe the battery died, so I tried the one in my mom's room. Same thing. No dial tone, nothing. I grabbed my cell, hands shaking so hard I almost dropped it, but the screen wouldn't load. No bars, no Wi-Fi, just searching. It made no sense. I had full service all weekend. I started panicking for real then. I locked myself in my room, pushed my dresser in front of the door as best I could, and sat in the corner with Murphy, trying not to hyperventilate. I kept the flashlight off to stay hidden. I remember holding my breath every time the house creaked. Then, out of nowhere, there was this muffled thud from the hallway, like someone had bumped into something, followed by silence again. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there waiting, eyes locked on the crack under the door, convinced I'd see a shadow pass by at any second. I stayed frozen like that until the first light of morning bled through the blinds. As soon as I felt it was safe enough, I moved the dresser and opened the door just a few inches. Everything looked normal, too normal, like whoever had been there was long gone, and careful. I checked every room, every closet, even the crawl space in the laundry room. Nothing. But the sliding door still had the smudge, and something else I hadn't seen before. On the wood floor right near the kitchen, a partial footprint, bare, dirty, way too big to be mine. I snapped a picture and finally got enough signal on my phone to call the police. My voice was shaking so bad, I could barely explain what happened. The officer who showed up tried to be reassuring, but I could tell he didn't really believe me. He checked the windows, the doors, and took a quick look around. But there were no signs of forced entry, no evidence according to him. I showed him the photo of the footprint, but it wasn't enough. He said maybe I'd imagined the rest, stress, meds, being home alone after surgery, but I know what I heard. I know that someone was in that house with me, and I know that they were waiting, moving when I wasn't, watching from dark corners. That kind of feeling doesn't come from painkillers. I ended up spending the next 2 nights at Mr. Carlson's house across the street. He didn't ask questions, just gave me his guest room and said Murphy could sleep at the foot of the bed. When my mom came back, I told her everything. She believed me. She cried, actually, and kept saying she never should have left me alone. We got the locks changed, installed a security system, and she bought me one of those emergency phones that can dial 911 even without a SIM card. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep unless Murphy was curled up against me, and I kept imagining footsteps outside my door. It's been a year since then. Nothing else happened. Whoever it was never came back. But to this day, I can't look at our sliding glass door at night without feeling that cold, crawling sensation under my skin. Like something out there remembers me. Like it's just waiting for another quiet weekend, another unlocked window. And the scariest part? I'll never know why they were there. I'll never know what they wanted or what would have happened if I hadn't woken up when I did. I've never been great at asking for help, but after the accident 3 years ago, I had no choice. I was 28, stuck in a third-floor apartment with no elevator, relying on daily nurse visits to help with basic stuff: cooking, showering, getting dressed. Most days it was Mr. Lewis, a calm older guy who respected my space, but that Wednesday, he was out sick. I remember because the agency had called earlier to say someone else would be covering. I was already dreading it. New people always meant awkward small talk and relearning my whole routine. The morning had gone by uneventfully, slow and quiet like most of my days. I worked from home, doing basic web design gigs, and kept my phone nearby for any agency updates. By 1:30 p.m., no one had shown up, which wasn't unusual. They always gave a vague, between 1 and 3 window, so I wasn't concerned. But something about the silence in the apartment that day. It was thick, like the walls were absorbing sound. I brushed it off as my nerves. I hadn't slept well, and sometimes the isolation messes with your head. Around 2:10 p.m., I heard a soft knock at the door. Not the usual confident thud I was used to from Mr. Lewis. This was timid, 3 spaced-out taps. When I opened it, there stood a woman in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, with shoulder-length dark hair tied back and a calm, professional smile. "Hi, I'm Emily. I'm filling in for Lewis today," she said, lifting her agency badge slightly like it was second nature. She seemed nice enough, friendly, but not overbearing. I let her in and rolled myself back toward the kitchen so she could get settled. She was only inside for about a minute, maybe 2, before her whole demeanor changed. I saw it happen. She froze near the hallway that led to my bedroom. Her eyes didn't blink for a full 3 seconds. Then, with a tight voice, she said, "Hey, listen, there's a gas smell. We should probably step outside just to be safe." I looked at her, confused. I didn't smell anything, but something in her face, I can't explain it. She wasn't panicked, but she was definitely serious. She moved toward me fast, like she wasn't going to let me argue. And I didn't. Something in my gut told me to go. Emily helped me into my jacket and grabbed my phone and keys without me even asking. The whole time, she kept glancing over her shoulder toward the hallway. We made it out the front door, down the cramped stairwell, and onto the sidewalk in record time. I remember the cold air hitting my face. It was sharp, almost metallic. As we stopped a few feet away from the building, she turned to me and said quietly, "There's no gas leak." I blinked, confused. She looked straight at me and added, "There was a man in your bedroom, hiding behind the curtain." At first, I honestly thought she was messing with me, like some kind of sick joke. But then I saw her hands, shaking. Not dramatically, but just enough that I could tell she was holding back something. She went on, her voice low and steady. "He was standing completely still. I saw the toes of his shoes under the curtain when I passed your door. He didn't move, didn't speak, but he was there. And your door was locked from the inside, right?" I nodded slowly. "It always was. I lived alone. I never left it open, not even for a second." That's when the fear hit me. Real fear. Like my stomach dropped out of my body. I tried to remember every sound I'd heard that day, every creak, every hum of the building settling. Had I missed something? Had I been sitting in my chair scrolling through emails while someone stood silently just a few feet away? The idea that someone had been in my home, unseen for hours, it made my skin crawl. I felt violated in a way I still don't know how to explain. That apartment was my safe space, my whole world. And suddenly, it wasn't. Emily called the police right there on the sidewalk. They told us to wait outside and not go back in until they arrived. It took maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. I kept scanning the windows, half expecting a face to appear behind the glass. A neighbor from the second floor came out, asking if everything was okay, and Emily told him there was a possible gas issue. She didn't want to cause panic. I appreciated that. Meanwhile, I sat there, heart pounding, replaying every second of my morning. I hadn't heard a damn thing. No footsteps, no door opening, no voice. Just silence. When the cops finally went in, I held my breath the entire time. They were up there for maybe 20 minutes. One of them came back down and asked me again if I was sure I hadn't let anyone in. I told him no, absolutely not. I hadn't even opened a window that day. The officer said there were clear signs someone had been in the bedroom. The curtain had been pulled back, not fully, just enough for someone to peek out. There was a faint scuff on the wall behind it. And most disturbing of all, they found a used tissue and an empty granola bar wrapper under the bed. Not mine. That meant whoever it was had been there long enough to get comfortable. To eat. That messed me up more than anything. I kept imagining someone crouched under my bed while I went about my day, completely oblivious. The cops didn't find anyone in the apartment, though. No broken windows, no tampered locks. Nothing. The only way in or out was through the front door, which had been locked from the inside when Emily arrived. It didn't make sense. And that's what made it worse. Not knowing how he got in, or worse, how he got out. I didn't sleep at home that night, or the night after. My cousin let me crash at his place for a few days while I figured things out. Emily checked on me a couple of times, and I could tell she was still rattled too. Eventually, I broke the lease and moved into a new place, this time in a building with security cameras and a 24-hour front desk. I've never had another incident like that, but I don't think I'll ever feel completely safe again. Not in the same way. That day rewired something in my brain, made me more aware, more paranoid, and probably for good reason. To this day, I still don't know who that man was, or how long he'd really been there. Maybe he was waiting for me to fall asleep. Maybe he didn't expect someone to show up when they did. But if Emily hadn't noticed those shoes, if she hadn't trusted her instincts and acted fast, I don't even want to think about how that day might have ended. People always ask me why I'm so intense about locking up, checking corners, always having my phone nearby. And I just say, you wouldn't get it. Because unless you've ever lived with the quiet dread of knowing someone was in your home without your knowledge, you really wouldn't. I'm not the type of person who jumps at shadows, and neither is my boyfriend, Ryan. We had just moved into a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb of Cincinnati. This was in the spring of 2023, early April. Cold mornings, warm afternoons, still that crispness in the air. We were both in our late 20s, no kids, just us and our dog, Lily. I work remotely as a freelance designer, so I spend a lot of time inside the house, and Ryan has a 9-to-5 managing a local tech repair shop. The house wasn't anything fancy, older but charming in that needs some love kind of way. We were excited to turn it into a home, to start this new chapter together. Looking back now, I realize how naive we were about the kind of danger that doesn't knock on your door. It slips through when you're not looking. The first few days were filled with boxes, takeout, and the kind of tired happiness that comes from building something of your own. We'd fall asleep exhausted each night with Lily curled at our feet. But on the 4th night, something shifted. I woke up around 2:30 a.m. because I thought I heard footsteps in the hallway. Not loud ones, just soft, careful creaks on the old wood floor. The kind you'd hear if someone was walking barefoot, deliberately slow. At first I thought it was Ryan, but when I turned over, he was sound asleep. His breathing steady, one arm over his face like always. Lily wasn't barking or growling, but her ears were perked. She was listening too. I sat up, heart starting to race, and strained to hear again. Nothing. Just silence. That eerie kind of silence that makes you second-guess your own senses. I stayed awake for another hour, phone in hand, debating whether I should wake Ryan up or just let it go. Eventually, I convinced myself it had just been the house settling. It was old after all. The floors creaked even when we walked normally during the day. Still, I didn't sleep well the rest of the night. Every little sound had me on edge. In the morning, I told Ryan, and he chuckled, half asleep, and said, "Well, guess we've got a ghost already," before kissing my forehead and heading to the shower. I laughed too, nervously. But over the next few days, I started noticing things. Not huge things, just small shifts. A spoon in the sink that neither of us remembered using. A hallway light left on when we swore we'd turned it off. Once, a mug I was sure I'd left on the kitchen counter ended up by the basement door. I brought it up to Ryan again and he shrugged it off. "We're both tired and forgetful lately," he said. "It's probably just us." And honestly, that explanation worked for a little while. Until the night I found the basement door slightly open, just enough to show that it hadn't latched all the way. I remember staring at that basement door for a solid minute, just frozen. We rarely went down there, The previous owners had left behind some old paint cans and broken furniture, and it had this musty, cold smell like damp cement and forgotten time. I called for Ryan, trying to keep my voice steady, and he came over, half annoyed like I was overreacting. "It probably didn't click shut," he said, and pulled it closed with a firm tug. But even as he turned away, I noticed him glance back at it once more before heading to bed. That glance told me he wasn't as relaxed as he was pretending to be. 2 nights later, everything snapped into focus. I woke up again around the same time, 2:40 a.m., give or take, to that same creaking sound. But this time it was closer, much closer, like right outside our bedroom door. I didn't even breathe. I just listened. And then, very faintly, I heard what sounded like fingers brushing against the wall, that soft, dry, dragging sound. Lily was up too, but she didn't bark. She just let out this low, rumbling growl and stared at the door like she could see something I couldn't. My stomach dropped. I nudged Ryan awake, whispering, "Someone's in the house." He sat up, groggy and confused. But once he heard it too, he jumped out of bed and grabbed the baseball bat we kept in the closet. He opened the door fast, trying to catch whoever it was off guard. But the hallway was empty. Nothing. Lights off. No sound. Ryan checked every room while I stayed close behind him, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. We checked the windows, all locked. Front and back doors, locked. But when he opened the basement door, we both noticed the light was on. Neither of us had turned it on. That's when something changed in Ryan. He didn't speak, just tightened his grip on the bat and started down the steps. I stayed at the top, holding Lily's collar. She whined softly, like she didn't want him to go down there either. Ryan came back up maybe 5 minutes later, pale and tense. He didn't find anyone, but something was clearly wrong. "The window's unlocked," he said quietly, "and there's a blanket and a box of crackers on the floor behind the shelves. Someone's been staying down there." I felt cold all over. We called the cops immediately. They showed up about 20 minutes later, did a full sweep of the house, and told us what we never expected. Someone had definitely broken in through the basement window. But what chilled me the most wasn't the entry. It was the ladder the cops found hidden in the back corner. It led to a crawl space above our ceiling, the attic. The officers climbed up into the attic with their flashlights while Ryan and I stood downstairs, clutching each other in complete silence. I'll never forget the sound of one of the cops saying, "Oh, hell no," followed by a loud bang as something got knocked over up there. A few minutes later, they came down and told us what they found. A small sleeping area made out of old couch cushions and a camping mat, half-empty water bottles, food wrappers, and even a notepad. The worst part? The pad had little notes about our routine. What time Ryan left for work, what time I walked Lily, when I usually showered. They said it looked like someone had been living above us for days, maybe longer. I think I went numb, like my brain just refused to process it. Someone had been up there while I was working in the living room, while I was cooking, while Ryan and I had dinner. I kept picturing him lying on the insulation just above our heads, silently listening to everything, watching us through the vent grates. I kept wondering how many times I might have passed under him without knowing. And then a new fear hit me. What if he was still in the house? But the officers assured us the attic was empty, no signs of him. They figured he had slipped out sometime during the night, probably after hearing us moving around. They filed a report and told us to stay somewhere else for the night just to be safe. So we packed a few things, grabbed Lily, and drove to Ryan's sister's place 20 minutes away. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every creak, every distant car sound made me flinch. I couldn't stop thinking about that notepad, the detail, the handwriting, the fact that this man, whoever he was, knew so much about us, and we had no idea he even existed. Ryan tried to stay calm, but I could see the way he kept checking the windows every 5 minutes, the way he held Lily a little too tight when she jumped up on the bed. The next day, we returned with 2 locksmiths and had every lock in the house replaced. We sealed the basement window shut, put up cameras, and even added motion lights around the outside. For weeks after, I still had trouble being in the house alone. Any thud or tap made me freeze. I'd even catch myself staring at the ceiling waiting to hear movement. But the man never came back. The police never found him. They think he was just some drifter looking for shelter, but I'm not so sure. Nothing was stolen. He had food. He had water. He had a place to sleep. But he also had a front row seat to our lives. And that, to me, is way scarier than theft. A couple weeks after everything happened, Ryan decided to go up into the attic one last time, just to check it for himself in the daylight. I stayed downstairs, pacing, holding my phone with 911 already punched in. When he came back down, he was quiet for a bit, then finally said, "There's something they missed." He handed me an old disposable camera, the kind people barely use anymore. It was tucked in a corner behind the insulation. I held it like it might burn me. We weren't even sure if it had anything on it, but we took it to one of the few places in town that still developed film. We waited 3 days, and when we picked up the photos, I genuinely felt like throwing up. Most of the pictures were blurry, random ceiling shots, corners of rooms, but some of them were clear, very clear. There were photos of me sitting on the couch working, photos of Ryan brushing his teeth. One picture of us both sleeping, taken from the hallway, our bedroom door cracked open just slightly. That image is seared into my brain, the framing, the distance. He had been just feet away from us, standing there, watching. The guy had been documenting us like we were some kind of project. The police took the photos and opened another investigation, but again, nothing came of it. No fingerprints, no leads, no trace. Eventually, life settled again. We stayed in the house mostly because we couldn't afford to move, and maybe also because we didn't want him to take that away from us too. But things were never the same. We became hyper-aware of every sound, every movement. We got a security system with alerts sent straight to our phones. I started locking the bathroom door while I showered. Ryan stopped brushing off my instincts. We stopped leaving anything unlocked, even for 5 minutes. It changed the way we lived, the way we thought. That kind of violation doesn't just go away. People always assume home invasions are violent and loud, but ours was quiet, patient, almost invisible. And I think that's what makes it worse. He didn't want our stuff. He wanted access to our lives. I still don't know how long he was up there. Weeks? A month? Longer? What if I hadn't heard that first creak in the hallway? What if Lily hadn't growled? I try not to spiral too much, but some nights, I still find myself staring at the ceiling, listening, just in case. Because once you've been watched like that, you never really feel unwatched again. I'm not much of a storyteller, never was. But after what happened in January of last year, I've found myself replaying that night over and over again, hoping someone out there might read this and say, yeah, something like that happened to me too. I'm 82, been retired from the post office for over 2 decades, lost my wife, Mary Ann, in 2017 to a stroke, and since then, it's just been me and my dog, Benny. I live in a small single-level house in Ohio. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a creaky little hallway that I never paid much attention to until recently. Life slowed down a lot after Mary Ann passed. I kept to my routines. Morning coffee at 6:30, Benny's walk by 7, crossword puzzles around noon, and an old Western on TV before bed. That kind of life makes you notice when something's off. And lately, things were off. At first, I thought it was age. Forgetting where I placed my glasses, misplacing the TV remote. But then it started happening too often, and not just with things I usually used. A mug I hadn't touched in weeks suddenly in the dish rack. My slippers moved to the other side of the bed. The house felt subtly rearranged. I started noticing a weird smell around the hallway too. It wasn't strong, kind of like warm metal mixed with something sour like old sweat. Benny didn't like that hallway anymore. He used to nap in the spot near the linen closet. but he started avoiding it completely, choosing to sleep by the front door instead. I thought maybe a mouse had died in the crawl space. I even called my nephew to check it out, but we didn't find anything. Just some cobwebs and an old box of my wife's keepsakes that I didn't have the heart to open. Nothing explained the smell, though, or why I sometimes woke up at 3 a.m. feeling like someone was watching me. The worst part started about a week before that night. I'd be lying in bed, lights off, Benny snoring at my feet, and I'd hear what sounded like faint breathing. I chalked it up to the house settling or the furnace kicking on. But this wasn't rhythmic like a machine. It sounded human, uneven, like someone trying to breathe quietly through their mouth, and it always came from the hallway. I'd sit up, listen, heart pounding, then nothing. Just silence. I'd get up, peek down the hallway with my flashlight. Always empty. I even laughed at myself the next morning, thinking maybe I was just lonely. Grief and age can mess with your head. But I wasn't imagining it. I know that now. Everything came to a head on a Thursday night, January 12th. I remember the exact date because it was the same day the local grocery store finally stopped selling my favorite brand of instant coffee, which somehow annoyed me more than it should have. I had gone to bed a bit earlier than usual, around 9:30, because the wind had picked up outside and the temperature dropped hard, one of those nights where the house pops and shifts as it adjusts to the cold. Benny didn't even want to go out for his usual evening walk. He just stared at the door and whined a little, then went to lie down under the kitchen table instead of coming to the bedroom. That was the first red flag. Around 1:15 in the morning, I woke up suddenly. Not like when you drift up from a dream, but like something tugged me into being awake. The house was silent, but I felt that strange tightness in my chest, the kind of feeling you get when someone is standing behind you, even if you haven't turned around yet. I sat up slowly and listened, and then I heard it. My name. Walter. Whispered. Just once. From the hallway. Not loud, not threatening. Just close. Like someone trying to get your attention without waking up the whole house. I froze. Didn't move, didn't breathe. For a moment I thought maybe I dreamt it. But Benny barked, one short bark, sharp and nervous. He was still under the kitchen table. And I realized then, if he heard it too, it wasn't a dream. I grabbed the flashlight I kept next to the bed and pointed it at the hallway. Nothing. No movement, no sound. Just that faint, sour metal smell again. I walked toward the door, barefoot, feeling every bump in the old wood floor under my feet. My heart was thudding in my ears, and my hand was shaking so badly that the flashlight beam jittered like a strobe light against the walls. When I reached the end of the hallway and turned on the living room light, the place looked normal. But that's when I noticed the attic door was slightly open. I hadn't touched that door in years. I actually had to think for a second about how it even opened. It's one of those old wooden panels in the ceiling with a pull string. Normally it's flush against the frame, but now it was maybe half an inch open. Enough to see the shadows didn't line up right. I stood there staring at it for a full minute, my legs locking up like concrete. I wasn't going to open it. I just couldn't. So I backed away, turned on every damn light in the house, and sat in the recliner with Benny curled at my feet until sunrise. I didn't sleep a second that night. I just sat there, flashlight still in hand, listening and waiting. As soon as it was light out, I called the police. I didn't try to go up into the attic, didn't even walk near that part of the hallway. When the two officers arrived, I could see in their faces that they thought I was just another old man losing his grip. Until one of them climbed up into the attic. He was quiet for a long time. Then he called his partner to join him. A few minutes later, they came back down, both looking different. Not scared exactly, but alert. The younger one, Officer Martinez, asked me if I ever went up there, and I told him the truth. I hadn't set foot in that attic since 2008, when I boxed up some of Marianne's old sweaters. They told me they found a blanket, a used food wrapper, and a pile of what looked like shredded paper and cloth in the far corner of the attic. As if someone had made a crude little bed up there. It was dirty and damp. But here's the thing that chilled me the most. They also found scuff marks around the attic entrance, as if it had been opened and closed from the inside recently, and footprints in the crawl space near the heating ducts. Someone had been getting in and out at night, moving through the house when I was asleep, right above my head, right down that hallway. I wanted to throw up. I kept thinking about the whisper, the moved objects, Benny's behavior, the breathing. All those little things I'd tried to explain away. It hadn't been in my head. Someone had been living in my home, watching me, probably walking right past my bedroom door at night while I slept. They didn't find the person. Whoever it was must have slipped out through the side vent before morning. But the police said it looked like they'd been there for at least a couple weeks, maybe longer. I couldn't believe it. My own home, my space, violated in the quietest, most chilling way imaginable. After that, I couldn't stay there. I moved in with my daughter in Indiana a few weeks later, sold the house, haven't been back. I still check the ceiling sometimes when I'm alone in a room, out of habit. Listen for breathing that isn't mine. And every now and then, I swear I hear someone whisper my name in the dark, soft and close, just like that night. I know it's probably just my nerves. At least, I hope it is. But I've learned something. Real horror isn't loud. It doesn't come crashing in through windows. Sometimes it's silent, patient, hiding just above your ceiling, waiting for the right night to come down and say your name. I'm not the kind of person who usually posts stuff like this, but what happened to me last spring still messes with my head. My name's Natalie, I'm 34, and I live in Seattle. I had taken a few days off work to visit my sister, Lauren, and her family in Boise, Idaho. I hadn't seen them in a while. Her 2 kids were growing so fast, and her husband, Mark, had just finished renovating their house. It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend, just good food, backyard barbecues, and catching up. I drove in on a Thursday afternoon and planned to stay until Sunday. Nothing felt weird at first. Actually, everything felt too normal, which I now realize might have been the first red flag. Their house sits at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, not isolated but tucked far enough away from the main road that it gets pretty dark at night. On Friday afternoon, while Lauren was putting the kids down for a nap, I was sitting on the porch scrolling through my phone. That's when I noticed a black SUV drive by slowly. I didn't think much of it at first, until I realized it passed by again 10 minutes later, and then again maybe 20 minutes after that. Same car, same pace, slow, like the driver was looking for something. I mentioned it to Lauren, half joking, but she just shrugged and said, "Probably someone lost, happens around here." But for some reason, I couldn't shake the way it made my stomach knot up. That night, I kept glancing out the window in the guest room, half expecting to see headlights, but everything was still. Quiet. Lauren and Mark went to bed around 10:30 and I stayed up reading. I don't know why I kept looking at my phone instead of relaxing. Maybe part of me knew something was off. Around midnight, I finally turned off the light. Just as I was drifting off, the hallway light flickered. Then, total darkness. At first, I thought a fuse had blown, but then I realized my phone wasn't charging. The entire house had lost power. I got out of bed, confused, thinking Mark might have already gone to the breaker. But as I stepped into the hallway, I froze. From the corner of the house, I heard the faintest sound. It was deliberate, a slow, heavy step on wood. I remember whispering Mark's name, hoping he was awake and had heard it too. But everything felt wrong. Too quiet. Too slow. I crept toward the living room, heart pounding, using my phone light to see. And that's when I saw it. The back door, which had definitely been locked earlier, was now cracked open. Not fully open, just enough to see the darkness beyond it. My throat tightened. I backed up immediately, turned, and bumped into Mark. He looked wide awake and dead serious. He whispered, "Go get Lauren. Stay with the kids. Now." I'd never seen him like that. No hesitation, no doubt. Just pure urgency. I didn't argue. I ran. I grabbed Lauren, who was already halfway out of bed, confused and groggy. I didn't even have to explain. She saw my face and just whispered, "The kids?" We both rushed into their room. They were still asleep, thank God. We locked the door, pushed the dresser in front of it, and stayed quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then, from downstairs, a crash, like something being knocked over hard. Lauren gasped, and I held her hand tight. Her son stirred but didn't wake. I didn't know what Mark was doing or if he was okay. Every second felt like it stretched forever. Then we heard it. Footsteps, fast this time, running through the house. Someone else was in there. We stayed like that, frozen for what felt like 20 minutes but was probably less. Then we heard Mark's voice from the hallway. "It's me." He ran. Lauren started crying and I unlocked the door. Mark looked shaken, breathing hard, holding a fire poker from the fireplace. "He was inside," he said. "He had a mask. I swung at him. He ran out the back." We stood there in shock while he called the police. The weirdest part? He said the guy didn't try to fight, didn't speak, just turned and bolted when confronted, almost like he hadn't expected anyone to be awake or to fight back. But what made my stomach turn was what Mark found by the door after the guy fled. He had dropped a bag, a black duffel. Inside were zip ties, a pair of heavy-duty gloves, and a roll of gray duct tape. There was also a small folding knife and a flashlight with red lens tape on it, the kind that preserves night vision. It didn't feel like a robbery. It felt surgical, planned. The cops arrived maybe 15 minutes later and they took everything pretty seriously. They canvassed the area, checked the yard, asked us for every detail. One of the officers told us something that still gives me chills. He said there had been signs someone had been watching the house for a few days. Disturbed dirt under the fence line, cigarette butts near the tree line, and a small trail leading from the woods to just behind the shed. I couldn't sleep at all that night. None of us could. We stayed in the same room, door locked, with Mark sleeping upright in a chair, still holding that fire poker. Every time the house creaked, I jumped. The kids didn't understand, but they could feel something wasn't right. The next morning, a neighbor came by. Said he'd seen a dark SUV parked down the block off and on all week, but hadn't thought much of it. That matched what I'd seen earlier. The police took a report, collected evidence, but they told us outright, unless they catch him in the act or he makes another move, there's not much they can do. Just stay alert and call if anything else happens. That's it. That was the end of the official help. Lauren and Mark ended up installing a full security system the very next day. Cameras, floodlights, reinforced locks on all doors and windows. Mark even put motion sensors in the backyard and changed the alarm to one that worked, even if the power got cut. I canceled my return plans and stayed until Tuesday, partly to help, but mostly because I was too afraid to drive back alone. I kept replaying the moment I saw that back door cracked open. It felt burned into my brain. And what really haunted me was how close we all came to something so much worse. If Mark hadn't been awake, if I hadn't noticed that SUV earlier, if the guy hadn't dropped the bag and bolted, who knows how this would have ended. In the days that followed, Lauren kept trying to act like things were getting back to normal, but I could tell it had shaken her. She'd jump when the doorbell rang. Mark started sleeping with the lights on downstairs. Even the kids started asking if the man was coming back. The thing that stuck with me most was the silence of it all. The guy didn't speak. He didn't steal. He just moved through the house like he already knew it, like he had mapped it out in his head. And I think what scared me more than anything was the possibility that this wasn't random, that someone had picked their home, their family, and studied them. A few weeks after I got home, I got a call from Lauren. She said the police followed up. They had found the SUV abandoned a few towns over, wiped clean. No fingerprints, no plates. Whoever that man was, he knew what he was doing. It wasn't his first time, and I doubt it'll be his last. The cops think he was targeting houses in that area, testing reactions, looking for patterns. But with no solid leads, there was nothing more they could do. We never heard anything else. No arrests, no suspects, just an empty file and a long list of what-ifs. It's been almost a year now. I still double-check every lock before I go to sleep. I still peek out the window when I hear a car drive by slow. And sometimes, when I visit my sister again, which I do but never alone, I catch myself glancing into the woods behind her house, wondering if someone's out there watching. The scariest part of all this? We didn't stop him. We just scared him off. That man is still out there, and he wasn't there to rob. He came with zip ties, gloves, and duct tape. He came to do something else, something worse, and we'll probably never know just how close we were to it. I'm a single mom, and at the time this happened, it was just me and my son, Caleb, who was 15 back then. We had moved into that house about a year earlier, small 2-bedroom place in the suburbs of northern Illinois. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. I was juggling 2 jobs, waitressing during the day and bookkeeping from home at night. The garage door had been acting up for a while, and I finally got around to posting on a local Facebook group, asking if anyone knew a cheap handyman. That's how I found Gary. He messaged me almost instantly, said he lived close by, had years of experience, and could come the next morning. I was relieved. He seemed normal enough, friendly, talkative. Maybe too talkative, but I was used to people oversharing. Gary showed up in a beat-up red pickup truck with a bunch of tools rattling around in the back. Mid-40s, tall, wore jeans that had seen better days, and a navy hoodie with a faded logo I couldn't make out. He had this short beard with a weird streak of white running down the side of his chin, like someone had drawn a line through it. He talked a lot while working, mostly about how people these days don't know how to fix anything themselves. At one point he asked if I lived alone, and I remember laughing it off, saying, "Just me and my son." I didn't think anything of it at the time. It's the kind of thing people ask when making small talk. He finished in about an hour, told me the door should be working good as new, and only charged me $80. I thanked him and thought that was the end of it. A few days later, I started noticing the garage door sticking again. At first, I blamed the cold. Then I noticed fresh scratches near the lock, thin ones almost like someone had been trying to slide something inside. I stared at them for a long time that morning, my stomach doing this weird flip. I tried to convince myself maybe Caleb had tried to open it with something when he forgot the code, but he denied it. Said he hadn't even touched the garage. I thought about calling Gary, but I didn't want to sound paranoid. Or worse, accuse him of doing a bad job. I let it go even though it bothered me. I just made a mental note to keep an eye on it. Then, that Thursday night, I stayed up late working. Caleb had gone to bed around 11. I was at the kitchen table with my laptop, half listening to the ticking of the clock and the occasional creaks the house made when it cooled down. Around 1:30 a.m., I finally shut the laptop and went to rinse my mug in the sink. That's when I heard something. Not loud, just a soft click, like metal touching metal. I froze, heart thudding, and slowly turned toward the sound. Standing in the dark at the edge of the kitchen, just past the hallway light, was Gary. Same hoodie, same boots. His hand was resting on the doorframe like he'd been standing there for a while, watching. For a second, I couldn't even speak. My mind just blanked. It was like my body knew something was wrong before my brain could catch up. Gary didn't say anything. He just stood there, eyes fixed on me like he was waiting for a reaction. I remember my throat going dry and my fingers tightening around the coffee mug without even realizing it. Finally, I managed to whisper, "What are you doing here?" And he smiled, this weird, crooked smile that didn't reach his eyes. He said, "Garage door's still acting up, huh?" Like it was a joke, like this was normal. My legs felt like jelly. I glanced toward the hallway, toward Caleb's room, and that's when Gary took a slow step forward. I backed up until I hit the sink. I tried to sound firm, told him to get out or I'd call the cops, but my voice shook. He didn't move. Just tilted his head and said, "I thought maybe I could come back and finish what I started." There was something so off in the way he said it. like he wasn't talking about the garage at all. That's when I noticed his left hand. He was holding something. I couldn't tell what it was at first, just the glint of metal, but it was small, and he kept twirling it in his fingers. Later, I realized it was a key. My key. I don't know how he made a copy, but I didn't need to know. All I knew in that moment was that he had been inside before. He had planned this. Before I could react, another sound broke the tension. A loud thud from down the hall, like something heavy hitting the wall. Gary turned his head just slightly, distracted for a second. That's when Caleb appeared. My son, half asleep but alert enough to understand something was wrong, stood at the end of the hallway holding his old wooden baseball bat. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The sight of him, tall for his age and angry in a way I hadn't seen before, shifted something. Gary looked back at me, like trying to calculate his next move. I didn't give him the chance. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, an iron skillet on the stove, and raised it with both hands. Gary took a step back, muttering something under his breath. I stepped forward, skillet still raised, and shouted at Caleb to call 911. My son didn't even hesitate. He darted into my room where I kept my phone charging by the bed. Gary must have realized he was out of time because he bolted. Not through the front door, though. He turned and ran straight out the back, through the sliding glass door that I know had been locked earlier. That's when it hit me. He'd probably been in the house before, maybe more than once. I locked the doors every night, religiously, but maybe that didn't matter anymore. Not with him having his own key. The police arrived within 10 minutes, but Gary was long gone by then. I showed them everything. The scratches on the garage lock, the duplicate key I found the next day tucked behind the fuse box in the basement, and even the Facebook messages where I first talked to him. They took it seriously, thankfully. One of the officers told me quietly, after Caleb went back to his room, that this wasn't the first time they'd heard of something like this. Handymen or repair guys using jobs to scope out homes. That made my stomach turn. The idea that he could have come in at any time while we were asleep. I couldn't shake it. I still can't. The days after that were a blur. I had every lock in the house changed. Installed cameras, motion lights, even one of those doorbell cams with two-way audio. I couldn't sleep properly for weeks. Every little sound made me sit up in bed, heart racing. Caleb stopped sleeping with his door closed. He said it made him feel trapped. We started leaving lights on in the hallway at night. And that back door, the one Gary used, I had it sealed shut permanently. I didn't care if it was inconvenient. I wasn't taking any chances. They never caught him. At least not that I know of. A detective followed up once or twice in the weeks after, but eventually the calls stopped. His Facebook profile disappeared. The number he gave me was disconnected. It was like he just vanished. But every now and then, I swear I still see that red pickup truck parked a few streets over, just sitting there. Never for long, never close enough to be sure, but enough to keep me on edge. Enough to make me keep my phone charged and a bat by the bed just in case. People always ask me why I didn't trust my gut when I saw the scratches on the lock. Why I didn't go with a licensed repair service instead of some random guy online. But the truth is, when you're juggling work, bills, and raising a kid alone, you start cutting corners where you can. You tell yourself it'll be fine, that you're being paranoid, that people are mostly good. And most of the time, they are. But it only takes one person with bad intentions. One moment of thinking you're safe, and suddenly your whole world tilts sideways. I still think about how differently that night could have gone. If Caleb hadn't gotten up to use the bathroom, if I hadn't left that skillet on the stove, if Gary had been faster or more determined. These what-ifs haunt me more than the actual memory. Because the truth is, I don't know what he wanted. I don't know how far he planned to take things. But I do know this. He didn't expect resistance. He thought I'd freeze. Thought we'd be easy targets. He was wrong. Since then, I've joined a few online groups for single moms, women who've had similar close calls. And sadly, there are a lot of us. It's made me realize how common this kind of thing actually is, even if nobody talks about it. So I'm sharing my story here not for sympathy, but to warn someone, anyone, who might be reading this and thinking of hiring a stranger off the internet to fix something in their home. Vet them. Watch them. Don't ever let your guard down, because once someone has a key to your front door, they don't need to break in. I never saw Gary again, and maybe I never will. But the fear he left behind, that stayed. It lives in the way I double-check locks now, the way I keep my curtains drawn at night, in the way I look over my shoulder in parking lots, and most of all, in the way I no longer assume that just because someone smiles and offers help, they're harmless.